Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott.
Ezekiel Elliott entered the NFL and he was immediately the best running back in the league. He had all-pro players slobbering over his name.
Say his full name. Let me hear you say it.
Ezekiel Elliott.
Oh, Ezekiel Elliott.
And defensive coordinators had no idea how to slow down the freight train. Nobody, and I mean nobody, had any idea how to stop him.
Ezekiel Elliott is in another category, another echelon.
Any standard, potential or numbers, Zeke passes the test. He's the #1 running back in the NFL.
It's Elliott! Elliott for the touchdown! No flags! Cowboys lead! 9 seconds left.
Cowboys had taken him 4th overall that year, and right away he looked like he belonged.
With the 4th pick in the 2016 NFL Draft, the Dallas Cowboys select Ezekiel Elliott, running back, Ohio State.
Running for 1,631 yards and 15 touchdowns, leading the league in rushing and making first-team All-Pro.
Setting up a screen for Elliott with blocking. Huge play. Elliott into Steeler territory. Down the sideline. And in for the touchdown. No flags.
3 seasons later, he was the highest-paid running back in the league.
Zeke Elliott has the deal he's wanted. He is now the highest-paid running back in the NFL.
And then everything fell apart.
TMZ released a video yesterday of Ezekiel Elliott pulling down a woman's shirt at a St. Patrick's Day party on
The NFL has suspended Ezekiel Elliott for 6 games after an investigation into alleged domestic violence.
Cowboys grant Ezekiel Elliott's request to be released.
Zeke went from being one of the most exciting players in the NFL to being out of the league shortly after getting paid. But how? Zeke grew up with football in his veins in St. Louis, Missouri. His dad was actually a linebacker at the University of Missouri and his mom was a track athlete there. From the moment he could run, it was clear he had something special, and he spent his high school years proving it on the field and on the track. He won state championships in 3 different sports at John Burroughs School, and as a senior he dominated in football with over 2,000 rushing yards and 40 TDs, while also winning state titles in the 100-meter dash, 200-meter dash, the 110-meter high hurdles, and 300-meter hurdles. He was named Missouri's Gatorade Track Athlete of the Year on top of all that. Even then, his competitive mindset set him apart during a youth football scrimmage. He kept laying out the same defender over and over again, even though he didn't have the ball. And when someone asked him why, he said, "Coach says you don't block, you don't get the ball." Most kids at that age care about scoring touchdowns, but Zeke was already thinking about the whole game. He was a 4-star recruit, ranked 70th overall nationally. He got offers from Ohio State and Missouri along with some other schools. There was definitely pressure for him to go to Missouri and follow in his father's footsteps, but he decided to pave his own way and go to Ohio State. When he got there, he had to wait his turn. As a freshman in 2013, he only carried the ball 30 times and mostly played on special teams. The following year, the running back ahead of him left for the NFL, and Elliott finally got his chance. He seized the moment and exploded onto the college football scene with 1,878 rushing yards, the second most in Ohio State history at that time. And in the college football playoff that year, he ran for 476 yards and 6 TDs in 2 games, leading the Buckeyes to a national championship. He followed that up with 1,821 rushing yards and 23 touchdowns the next season, leading the conference. And then he declared for the NFL draft. The Dallas Cowboys had the 4th overall pick in 2016, and they decided to use it on Ezekiel Elliott. In an era where teams no longer believed in building around running backs, the Cowboys bucked the trend and took Elliott with the understanding that he would be a 3-down back from day one.
With the 4th pick in the 2016 NFL Draft, the Dallas Cowboys select Ezekiel Elliott, running back, Ohio State.
He had the size and speed to be a workhorse at the next level. However, something behind the scenes was brewing against Zeke. In July, his ex-girlfriend Tiffany Thompson accused him of domestic abuse back at Ohio State. Now, that wouldn't affect his rookie season, however, it would soon become a massive issue. There was no time to adjust for Zeke though, because unlike most rookies, he was named the Cowboys starter week 1, and the expectations were immediate. The season opener wasn't anything special. He had just 51 rushing yards on 20 carries, and then in week 2 he had 2 fumbles and was benched, which made people begin to question whether Dallas had reached on the draft pick. The next 4 games were crucial for proving them wrong, and Zeke responded with 4 straight 130-plus yard games, 569 rushing yards in that span, and a level of confidence that started to build. From there, he never looked back. Arguably his most impactful game that season came against the Pittsburgh Steelers that year in week 10, having 21 carries for 114 yards and 2 TDs, including scoring the game-winning touchdown.
It's Elliott! Elliott!
He finished his rookie season with 1,631 rushing yards and 15 touchdowns, leading the league in those rushing yards and also third in rushing TDs that season. It was the third most yards by a rookie in NFL history at that time, and he was named first team All-Pro. He had 7 100-yard games, and the Cowboys went 13-3 with a rookie quarterback and a rookie running back leading the way. He finished third in MVP voting that year. Matt Ryan won it with 25 votes, Tom Brady came in second with 10 votes, and Zeke had 6. For a rookie running back to finish that high in MVP voting, it was almost unheard of, and it set the expectation that Elliott would be a generational talent. The Cowboys went into the playoffs as the top seed in the NFC, and Zeke rose to the occasion in the divisional round against the Packers with 125 rushing yards. They would, however, lose 34-31 off the back of an incredible sideline throw from Aaron Rodgers to Jared Cook.
Good! The Packers are moving on! Aaron Rodgers has done it again!
He became just the second rookie in franchise history to rush for over 100 yards in a playoff game, and the trajectory looked like he was heading towards sustained dominance. The Cowboys were humming on all cylinders, and it seemed like a foregone conclusion a deep playoff run was imminent. But right when it seemed like Zeke had it all figured out, the world around him came crashing down. In March 2017, Zeke was recorded pulling down the top of a woman for St. Patrick's Day. Then a month before the 2017 season, the NFL suspended him for 6 games for violating the personal conduct policy following the now year-long investigation into accusations of domestic violence against his ex-girlfriend. And he was the first player disciplined under the NFL's new domestic violence policy. The news hit the league like a bomb. Elliott maintained his innocence throughout, and his team supported him. But the suspension was upheld after a series of appeals that allowed him to play for the first 2 games of the season, but he finally accepted the 6-game ban halfway through the year. Playing in only 10 games that year, Elliott finished with 983 rushing yards and 7 TDs. His absence was deeply felt by the Cowboys, who missed the playoffs after going 13-3 the year before. The team that looked like a future dynasty was suddenly mortal again, and a lot of that was attributed to not having their best player on the field for a third of the season. He was watching from home while his team struggled, and it was clear that the incident had taken a toll on him both mentally and physically. When he came back for 2018, he was determined to prove that he was still the player we had all seen as a rookie. Elliott came out the gate in 2018 like a man on a mission. In his first 4 games, he totaled 426 rushing yards and 125 receiving yards, while he was running with an anger and purpose that defenses hadn't seen before. However, after the first 7 games of that season, the Cowboys were 3-4. They knew they needed a change and that Zeke alone couldn't carry them back to the playoffs since the boxes were always loaded against them. So Jerry Jones made a call.
The Raiders plan to trade wide receiver Amari Cooper to the Dallas Cowboys.
With the addition of Amari on the outside, Zeke got lighter boxes and would soon start dominating even more. He channeled all his frustrations from the suspension into his running style, and he punished defenders with his bulldozing approach when he wanted to run them over, or simply blew past them with his breakaway speed when he decided not to hit somebody. He had a run from week 10 to week 12 where he went for 151 yards and 2 TDs against Philly, then 122 yards and a TD against the Falcons, then capped it off against Washington with 121 yards and another touchdown. All wins. The NFL rushing title was within reach, and he went out and took it with 1,434 yards on the ground to go along with 567 receiving yards. And he was named to his second Pro Bowl and All-Pro second team, along with leading the league in carries. His dominance helped lead the Cowboys back into the postseason, and they earned a wildcard matchup with the Seattle Seahawks. In that game, Elliott put the team on his back with 137 rushing yards and a touchdown in a 24-22 victory that had everyone believing the Cowboys were back. But then against the Los Angeles Rams in the divisional round, he was locked down and limited to just 47 yards on 20 carries, in a 30-22 loss that left a sour taste in his mouth. He had bounced back from the suspension, but the season ended the same way it did in 2016, with a playoff loss and more questions about whether he could actually carry a team deep into January. But what came next was even more drama. The contract negotiations would ultimately lead him to getting the contract he wanted, but also the weight of that burden may have been too much. However, before we get into that, if you're enjoying the content, I'd appreciate it if you subscribed. It lets YouTube and myself know that you're enjoying this video and want to see more like it. Now let's get back into it. After the Cowboys picked up the 5th-year option at offseason, Zeke held out a training camp and a preseason demanding a new deal. Shout out FDR. He skipped all of training camp, all the preseason, and reported just before the 2019 season was set to begin. The holdout was risky because he was leaving money on the table every day he stayed away. There was no guarantee the Cowboys would cave to his demands. But Elliott believed he was the best running back in the league and he wanted to be paid like it. So he decided to take a trip to Cabo and post himself running hills. The Cowboys finally gave him what he wanted, signing him to a 6-year extension worth $90 million with $50 million guaranteed.
Cowboys and Ezekiel Elliott have agreed to terms on a massive contract extension, according to Jane Slater and myself. 6 years, $90 million for the Cowboys and Zeke Elliott. Sources say more than $45 million in guaranteed.
And it made Elliott the highest paid running back in the NFL at the time. The expectations that were already enormous became almost impossible to overcome. Anytime a player inks a massive contract like that, the following year is supposed to be a statement season. For Zeke and the Cowboys, that didn't happen in the way anyone expected. He put together another solid season with 1,357 rushing yards, which was the 4th most in the league that year, but the team went 8-8 and missed the playoffs. The offense that had looked so explosive with Elliott and Dak together had become inconsistent, and some of that was because Zeke looked slower. The explosiveness that had made him special as a rookie and in 2018 wasn't quite there anymore, and it was the first real sign that Father Time might be catching up with him earlier than anyone expected. The contract had been a gamble for both sides. The Cowboys bet that Elliott can maintain his elite level, and Zeke bet that the wear and tear on his body wouldn't catch up to him so quickly. By the end of 2019, it was becoming more clear that maybe neither side was going to win this bet. But there was still hope to be had. The Cowboys would finally fire Jason Garrett at the end of the year and usher in a new era with Mike McCarthy. At least that was the expectation. The 2020 season was supposed to be the year the Cowboys had figured it all out, that Zeke would reclaim his throne as the best running back in the league. And though there definitely was a turning point, it wasn't for the positive. The team went 6-10, and Elliott finished with only 979 rushing yards and 6 TDs, his lowest rushing total since his rookie year, even lower than the season when he was suspended for 6 games. It was a stunning drop for a player who had been considered among the elite at his position just 2 years earlier. People began to wonder if this was just a fluke or the new norm for Zeke. The offensive line had been a strength for the team for years, but injuries and attrition had started to take their toll, and that definitely didn't help. But the numbers didn't lie. Elliott wasn't the same player he had been in 2016 through 2018, and the decline wasn't marginal. His yards per carry dropped from 5.1 as a rookie to 4.7 in 2018, to 4.5 in 2019, and then 4.0 in 2020. He was still getting carries and playing 16 games a season, but the impact and explosiveness just wasn't there anymore. Y'all ever feel bad being hate watch? Me neither, but I'm saying that would have been the time I would have felt bad if I were to ever feel bad about a Dallas Cowboy, which has never happened. The breakaway runs that had defined his early career had become few and far between, and the wear of being a workhorse running back in the NFL was starting to show. By 2021, a conversation had started about whether Tony Pollard should be getting more carry. Elliott played all 17 games and had 1,002 rushing yards, but his yards per carry was still just 4.2, and Pollard was averaging 5.5 yards per carry whenever he touched the ball. Fans were noticing. They were vocal about wanting to see more of the younger, faster, more explosive back. Tony had arrived, and the running back conversation in Dallas was starting to shift. Tony Pollard was drafted in the 4th round in 2019 and was Zeke's backup ever since. But in 2021, he started to show he could be more than just a change of pace back. When Pollard got opportunities, he made the most of them, and by the end of the season, fans were calling for him to get more touches or even be named the starter. Tony finished that year with 719 rushing yards on just 131 carries, a 5.5 average, while scoring 2 TDs. The Cowboys found themselves in a delicate position because they had just paid Elliott like he was an unquestioned starter, and they weren't about to give up on him just after a few down years. So in 2022, they tried a split backfield approach, giving both backs carries and trying to find out ways to use both of them effectively, but it became very clear early on that one player was simply better than the other. Elliott finished 2022 with 876 rushing yards on 3.8 yards per carry, his lowest mark since his rookie year, and Pollard had 1,007 rushing yards on 5.2 yards per carry. Zeke had gone from being one of the top backs in the league to a glorified short yardage power back who could occasionally catch passes out of the backfield. It was a tough pill to swallow for everyone involved, but the numbers were too absurd to ignore. It was a 2022 divisional round against the 49ers, and the Cowboys were down 7 with 6 seconds left. They needed a miracle, so they emptied out the clip and lined up with 8 wide, 2 in the backfield, and Elliott playing center with no offensive line around him. This is the funniest play of all time. It was a latch-dish effort to get the ball downfield. As soon as Zeke snapped the ball, the 49ers linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair trucked him directly into the turf. The play fell apart immediately, and so did the Cowboys season. It was a perfect metaphor for where Elliott's career had ended up. He just wasn't a star anymore. The Cowboys had a decision to make because Pollard was set to be a free agent soon and the franchise tag was an option. But Elliott was still in the books for a massive cap hit, and the team had to make a decision on whether to keep both backs or let one go. In the end, on March 15th, they had made a move that would have been unthinkable just a few years earlier and released Zeke. He was set to account for $16.7 million against the salary cap, and the team realized he simply wasn't worth that anymore. But just because he wasn't worth that contract didn't mean a team didn't want him. Zeke waited his turn, and in July of 2023, he signed a one-year, $6 million deal with the New England Patriots. It was a chance to restart New England, where Bill Belichick had personally called Cowboys Executive Vice President Stephen Jones for insight and evaluations before hosting Elliott on a visit. The Pats lacked depth at running back, and Elliott was supposed to be a top complement to starter Ramondre Stevenson. But the season didn't go the way anyone expected. Zeke was no longer the bell cow back he had been in Dallas, and his numbers continued to decline. He averaged less than 3.5 yards per carry, and he wasn't making the same kind of impact that once made him special. He finished with just under 650 yards total. By the end of the season, it was clear that the Patriots experiment hadn't worked the way either side had hoped. In 2024, Zeke came back on a one-year deal with the Cowboys to prove he still had it, but he didn't. But the issues that had plagued him in recent years weren't just about his play on the field. Reports came out that Elliott had been late to multiple team events over the week before a game against the Falcons, that he had missed an entire meeting on Friday, and that there had been a pattern of habitual tardiness and missed meetings throughout the entire season.
That Ezekiel Elliott had been benched for disciplinary reasons. I'm told by multiple sources it was the result of habitual tardiness, missing 3 team meetings, with that final meeting happening on Friday.
The Cowboys made the decision to leave him behind in Dallas for that game, making him inactive for disciplinary reasons. It was a stunning fall from grace from a player who had once been the face of the franchise. He returned to play in a few more games that season, but the magic was gone, and the Cowboys had seen enough. He was released before the final game of the season, and his career in Dallas and the NFL officially ended. Looking back at his career, he was a stud. Elliott had a first-team All-Pro to his name, a second-team All-Pro to his name, 2 Pro Bowls, 2 rushing titles, and over 8,000 rushing yards total. He was one of just 3 running backs in Cowboys history to surpass 10,000 all-purpose yards, alongside Emmitt Smith and Tony Dorsett, and his 80 career touchdowns ranks 3rd in franchise history, but none of that really mattered at the end. The league is a business, and when a player stops producing at a high level, the league moves on. Elliott's peak was impressive, but it was relatively short. His best years came early, and by his late 20s, he was already being phased out of the league entirely. He's not the first running back to experience this kind of fall, and he won't be the last. The running back position in the NFL has one of the shortest shelf lives of any position in professional sports. The human body can only take so much punishment over so many years, and running backs absorb more contact than almost any other position on the field. Most elite running backs begin to decline around ages 27 or 28, and Elliott wasn't an exception. His explosiveness started to fade after his first few seasons, and by the time he was 27 or 28, he was no longer the same player who had taken the league by storm as a rookie. Teams know this, which is why they're so cautious about committing long-term money to running backs, why the 5th-year option exists and so does the franchise tag, and why so many running backs rarely get the kind of fully guaranteed deals that quarterbacks do. Zeke at his peak was genuinely special, but Father Time remains undefeated, especially at that position, and that's just the nature of the game. So there you have it. Watch this next video if you haven't already, and subscribe if you're new. Thanks for watching.